On August 8th of 2017, a game by Bosky Productions came out. LawBreakers was a first-person shooter game that was developed to innovate upon traditional FPS games by introducing low-gravity gameplay. In spite of positive reviews from game critics, the game servers were shut down the following year as a result of low returns. Some games don't last forever. Even Halo 2 was shut down eventually. That's why we should take the time to appreciate the video games we have. With that aside, let's talk about the game and the title of the video, Team Fortress 2. The franchise started from humble beginnings. The original game, Team Fortress Classic, was a mod of Quake, which in and of itself was a mod for Doom. Even though Team Fortress 2 came out in 2007, the game continues to maintain a daily player base of around 80,000 players, and sparked hundreds of communities that are still active to this day. What differentiates a successful game like TF2 from LawBreakers? In this video, I'll be going over exactly that. When you think about how a game manages to sustain a player base, story and characters aren't usually the things that come to mind. The Meet the Team series was a collection of cinematic videos released by Valve that introduced the 9 playable mercenaries, giving players an insight into both the characters' personalities and their gameplay mechanics. Meet the Medic is currently the most viewed video, amassing over 61 million views. These characters fuel the community in the shape of fan art, SFM videos, and fan fiction. When you look for a game, the biggest reason for playing it is for the gameplay itself. Team Fortress 2 has been praised for how someone can play the 9 different mercenaries in completely unique ways. Team Fortress's mechanics allow for special techniques, or tech, that you wouldn't find in any other games, such as trickstabs and rocket jumping. Trickstabbing is a special technique that can be practiced and learned by a spy player. Through taking advantage of the leniency of what is called the back hitbox of a character model, they are able to register a backstab from a side angle. Here's how a professional spy player, MrPaladin, describes how the technique works.
Backstabs used to be just directly at the back, but now there's a bit more leniency with Team Fortress 2, where you can go from about this angle over here on the right side all the way to about this angle here on this side, so that's a very generous back.
On the other hand, rocket jumping is a unique traversal technique that allows for soldier players to exploit the physics engine and leap long distances. As the name implies, rocket jumping is accomplished by launching a rocket at your feet while jumping, increasing your character's altitude and momentum. Now, what exactly do these two things have in common? Well, they're player-made techniques. In video games, there's a thing known as the skill ceiling and the skill floor. Skill ceiling being defined as the level of play that's possible with training and mastery, while skill floor being the complete opposite, the minimum level of ability required to be effective. Player-made techniques like the two examples I brought up allow for a clear indicator of a gap between the skill ceiling and floor. Only through practice and training are people able to learn techniques, which not only increases the enjoyment of a game, but also extends its longevity. To talk about how techniques are handled by developers in video games, let's take Overwatch as an example. In a gameplay perspective, Team Fortress 2 and Overwatch are very similar games that share a couple of distinct differences. On one hand, when Blizzard was faced with the discovery of the bunny hopping technique for Mercy, which was a technique that allowed her to take advantage of the physics engine to boost herself further, Blizzard released a patch to remove it, which effectively lowered the skill ceiling of the character. On the other hand, when Valve was met with the discovery of rocket jumping, they started to incorporate the idea into the game with specific weapons like Rocket Jumper that would enhance the experience. Aside from the implementation of support for these user-made techniques, Team Fortress 2's gameplay is further enhanced upon the choice of customization for each of the 9 mercenaries. As I briefly touched upon while talking about how Valve chose to handle the situation, Team Fortress 2 has a weapon selection system that allows for the personalization of how you play each character. Not only are the weapons like the Glove of Regening urgently, where it simply adjusts your stats, but there are weapons like the Sandwich which completely change how the slot is used, transforming your damage-dealing shotgun into a support item. But Valve took it one step further, as they started to implement the idea of subclasses. Do you have trouble aiming grenades as a demo man? Well, the game allows you to switch in your explosive weapons for a shield and boots, transforming the demo man into a melee-focused class. Even though Team Fortress 2 is one of the most well-known games of the 21st century, ever since June 23, 2011, the game has become free-to-play. People may have their own thoughts on Valve's decision to make the game free, but it's undoubtedly a choice that brought in hundreds, if not thousands, of new players. Though there is no definitive way to find out how many people actually pay for the game, I've come up with a way to figure it out. The proof of purchase is an all-class hat that resembles a militaristic Brody helmet. Why am I bringing this up? Well, as the name suggests, this hat is quite literally a proof of purchasing the game. As the game went free to play, Valve had to figure out a way to compensate for the original purchase, so they modeled the proof of purchase and added it into the inventory of every player that bought the game before the Uber update. With that information, we can utilize backpack.tf, a website that is used by players to check the backpacks of others. As we can see, backpack.tf lists that 834,883 players currently own the hat, which means that around 834,000 players originally paid for the game, a big difference from the player count of TF2. Compared to other games, Team Fortress 2 has a lighter-hearted atmosphere. For example, the Love and War update from 2014 introduced a variety of new weapons and hats, but most importantly brought in interactable taunts. Interactable taunts were similar to normal equipable taunts, the difference being that these taunts allowed for other players, both friendly and hostile, to interact. The Rock Paper Scissors emote was one of the 5 interactable emotes brought into the game. As the name implies, a player could activate the emote and initiate a game of Rock Paper Scissors with another player. The addition of interactable emotes could be one of the contributing factors to the influx of friendly players. Though the community continues to argue about the existence of this playstyle, it's undeniable that they had a helping hand in keeping the game interesting throughout the years. Though developers can influence the lifetime of their games, it's usually the community that takes a game and extends its life years by what is initially intended. Without the community's contribution to the game, Team Fortress 2 might not have been able to withstand the test of time. Crafting is a system that was implemented on December 17, 2009 with the War update. Though the update introduced the idea of crafting, the 3 types of scrap metal that the update brought in started a community-sustained system that nobody could have predicted. The currency was separated from scrap metal, reclaimed metal, refined metal, and keys. The Team Fortress 2's economy is highly complex and detailed. Not only do hats differ because of their different aesthetics and prices, but due to the ranking and tier system, half of the unusual tier can cost up to thousands of dollars. The most expensive item, the unusual Burning Deep Captain, costing up to $12,372.92 in US dollars. Even without updates from the official Valve developers, people have continued to develop off of Team Fortress 2. This includes websites, updates, and even whole different games. Backpack.tf is an example of a player-developed site that focused on the community of Team Fortress 2. The website started as a project by Steve, Brad Pitt, Rob Wayne in 2012 and has seen some large changes since then. The site holds the purpose of serving as a Team Fortress 2 price list, keeping track of users' backpack values and opening up opportunities for traders. For an example of updates to Team Fortress 2, I bring to your attention creators.tf. Creators.tf is a group of players to help create a new experience through Team Fortress 2. The group creates their own events and updates to the game, bringing in custom headgears, weapons, and maps. Finally, we come to Open Fortress, which is the idea of player development on a whole different level. Instead of developing the game itself, through using the source code of Team Fortress, they made their own game. Instead of being a 12v12 team shooter, Open Fortress added in the option of joining a 3rd and 4th team, a custom Quake-like gun game, and a multitude of other additions. To put it short, Open Fortress is a completely different game that shares the same gameplay feel and the art style as the original Team Fortress, while adding in hundreds of new, unique gameplay styles that make it a unique experience. Even though Team Fortress 2 is an incredibly popular game that consistently sits in the top 10 most played games on Steam, many people still believe that the game is dead or inactive. To prove my point, I decided to interview people at my school with a single question. Do you think Team Fortress 2 is dead? 23 hours after I posted the poll, I compiled the results. Out of 40 of the students I interviewed, a total of 38 responded that they believed TF2 was a dead game. In my opinion, this problem comes down to one main issue. Team Fortress 2 no longer gets as many updates as it used to. As of this moment, creators.tf list has been 1,169 days since the last major TF2 update. A huge contrast to Valve's other games like CSGO and Dota 2, which receive major updates multiple times a year. A lack of updates can easily kill games, especially if the last one came out more than a couple years ago. Updates keeps games from being repetitive and boring, bringing in new goals and new reasons for players to continue playing. If you ask me, I don't think TF2 will be dying anytime soon. Even without a big update in the near future, as I brought up in my video, the game itself and the community that it gave life to are still holding strong even after the update drought, outlasting hundreds of other games that have been dubbed as TF2's successor. As long as the servers aren't shut down by Valve themselves, TF2 will continue to hold its spot as the top 10 currently most played games on Steam.